Sweat trickled down tense necks in the crowded Atlanta courtroom. The air was thick with anticipation as Officer Sheila Brantley smirked, watching Marcus Holloway, a black man in a sharp suit, stand convicted of assaulting her. The judge's gavel crashed, sentencing him to 10 years. Yet Marcus nodded calmly, a secret glinting in his eyes. Sheila gloated, unaware her victory was a mirage. Then a clerk whispered something to the judge. Her face blanched. What truth could unravel this moment forever? 3 weeks before the courtroom drama shook Atlanta, the sun dipped low over the city's Buckhead district, casting long shadows across gleaming towers and upscale boutiques. Marcus Holloway gripped the wheel of his sleek black sedan, the engine purring as he navigated traffic. At 38, with close-cropped hair and a steady gaze, he carried himself with quiet assurance, the kind that came from years of proving doubters wrong. Tonight, he was just a man heading home after a long day, the radio humming a soft jazz tune. But trouble had a way of finding him, and it was watching from a patrol car parked near a boutique with frosted windows. Officer Sheila Brantley sat behind the wheel, her buzzed blonde hair catching the last rays of light. Her narrow hazel eyes scanned the road like a hawk hunting prey. At 42, she had spent 15 years on the force, her badge a shield for every grudge she carried, especially against men like Marcus. Something about his smooth stride, the way he neither shrank nor swaggered, twisted her gut. She didn't like it. As Marcus slowed at a stoplight, Sheila flicked on her headlights, the beams slicing through the dusk, and eased her cruiser forward. Tires crunched against gravel as she pulled up alongside him, her window already buzzing down. "Got a broken taillight, sir," she barked, her lips curling slightly, though she hadn't even checked. Marcus turned his head, meeting her stare with calm brown eyes, his brow lifting just a fraction. "I don't think so, officer. I had it serviced last week." His tone was even, polite, but firm, the kind of measured response that came naturally to him. Sheila's jaw tightened. She didn't like that either. Didn't like how he wasn't rattled, wasn't scrambling to please her. She swung her door open and stepped out, boots thudding on the pavement, her hand resting on the holster at her hip. "Step out of the vehicle," she ordered, voice dripping with the authority she assumed he'd bow to. Marcus exhaled softly, fingers pausing on the wheel before reaching for the door handle. He knew this dance, had known it since he was 16, and stopped for looking suspicious in his own neighborhood. He climbed out, standing tall at 6 feet 2 inches, his suit crisp against the fading light. "Can I ask what this is about?" he said, keeping his hands visible, his voice steady as stone. Sheila squared her shoulders, her wiry frame taut with irritation. "You're in a high-crime area, driving slow, looking like you don't belong. I need to see some ID." It was a lie, every word of it. Buckhead wasn't some gang-riddled slum, it was boutiques and bistros. But she didn't care. She saw a black man in a nice car, and that was enough. Marcus's lips pressed into a thin line, but he nodded, reaching slowly for his wallet. "I live 5 miles from here," he said, offering his license. Sheila snatched it, barely glancing at the name, Marcus Holloway, before tossing it onto her cruiser's hood. "Sure you do," she muttered, her sneer widening. A small crowd began to gather across the street, drawn by the flashing lights, a mix of curious shoppers and loiterers clutching coffee cups. Some whispered, others pulled out their phones, recording the scene as it unfolded. Sheila noticed, and it fueled her, made her chest puff out a little more. "Hands on the car," she snapped, stepping closer, her breath sharp with stale coffee. Marcus frowned, patience thinning but still intact. "Officer, I've done nothing wrong. You haven't told me what I'm suspected of." Sheila's eyes flashed, her irritation boiling over at his refusal to cower. "I said hands on the car. Now." Her hand twitched toward her baton. Marcus sighed, a slow, deliberate sound, and turned, placing his palms on the sedan's warm hood, his jaw tight. He'd been here before, knew compliance was the only way out, even if it burned inside him like a coal. Sheila didn't hesitate. She grabbed his wrist, twisting it hard behind his back, nails digging into his skin as she slapped cuffs on him with a metallic clank. "You're resisting," she hissed, though he hadn't moved an inch beyond her orders. Marcus winced as she yanked his other arm back, the steel biting into his wrists, but he kept his voice low. "I'm not resisting. You're making a mistake." Sheila shoved him against the car, his cheek pressing into the cool metal, her elbow jabbing his ribs for good measure. "Keep talking, tough guy," she spat, her face inches from his, breath hot against his ear. The crowd grew louder, some murmuring in disapproval, others egging her on with shouts of "Get him," and "Show him who's boss." A skinny man in a baseball cap clapped, grinning like it was a sport. Marcus stayed silent now, his mind racing, but his body still, knowing any twitch could escalate this further. Sheila stepped back, brushing her hands as if wiping off dirt, her smirk returning as she hauled him toward her cruiser. "Suspicious behavior," she announced to the onlookers, loud enough for the cameras. "Possible burglary suspect." It was nonsense, pure theater, but it played well to the chorus of cheers from the louder voices in the crowd. She shoved Marcus into the back seat, his long legs folding awkwardly, and slammed the door. The sound echoed off the boutique's glass facade. As she climbed into the driver's seat, she caught his eyes in the rearview mirror, steady and unblinking, and something about that look made her grip the wheel tighter. He wasn't scared, wasn't broken, and that unnerved her more than anything. Behind him, the humid air carried a fleeting taste of freedom. Marcus hugged Lena on the steps, her arms trembling around him. Her voice was a whisper. "We're okay, right?" He nodded, forcing a smile, believing he had dodged a bullet. Tanya's win had bought him time. The neighbors watched, some clapping, others muttering, "Got lucky this time." For a moment, Marcus felt the weight lift, believing the system might bend, that truth still had teeth. But Victor Rawls had other plans. Sitting in his corner office on the top floor of the precinct, Victor's meaty hands flipped through Marcus's file. His graying mustache twitched as he schemed. Sheila's call had lit the fuse, but Victor was the dynamite. He picked up his phone, dialing a contact at a local news station. "Chuck, a slimy editor with a taste for scandal. Got a scoop for you," Victor growled. "Marcus Holloway. The victim? He's got a rap sheet a mile long, drugs, theft, the works. I'll send it over." It was a lie, a forged document cooked up in an hour. But Chuck didn't care. He smelled ratings. By nightfall, the story broke. Channel SIXS evening broadcast flashed Marcus's face next to a fabricated list of crimes: possession, assault, grand larceny. Dates and charges plucked from thin air. The anchor, a woman with a tight bun and an even tighter smile, read the script with relish. New evidence suggests Marcus Holloway may not be the innocent man his viral video claims. The petition for justice stalled. Signatures dropped. Comments shifted. Always knew he was shady. Cops don't lie for no reason. Marcus sat on his couch, the TV's glow bathing the room in sickly light. Lena was beside him, her hands clenched into fists. "This isn't you," she said. But the damage was done. The public's cheers turned to boos. The tide had turned, now a tsunami against him. Across town, in a dive bar, Sheila watched the broadcast. The neon sign outside flickered as she lifted a beer bottle, its sweat mirroring hers. She toasted the screen, her laugh sharp and bitter. Victor's move had buried Marcus deeper than cuffs ever could. Back home, Marcus switched off the TV. Silence weighed heavy. His mind raced. He had walked free, thought he had won. But this was a gut punch he hadn't seen coming. The world now saw a criminal, not a victim. And he knew Sheila and her puppet master weren't done. The fight wasn't over. It was just getting uglier. The assault charge had been dismissed, but Victor's latest move slammed another door shut. A weapons charge now loomed, uglier, heavier, and the fight was far from over. Sheila met Victor at a diner later that night. Her beer clinked against his coffee mug. "Told you I'd get him," she said. Victor nodded. "Round one's ours. Round two is going to hurt more." Marcus Holloway slumped on his living room couch, the late July heat seeping through a cracked window. Outside, cicadas droned, a mocking lullaby against the chaos of the past week. The courtroom victory that erased Sheila Brantley's assault charge already felt like a distant echo, drowned out by Eddie Tatum's perjury about the Glock. The lie clung to him like damp rot. Lena knelt beside him, her braids brushing his arm. "We have to keep going, Marcus. They can't break us." He nodded, shoulders sagging. His navy suit jacket, stained with sweat and despair, lay draped over a chair. The TV flickered, muted news clips replaying the rally's carnage, his name tied to it like a noose. But tonight he wasn't alone. A spark flickered. Hope faint but real. Earlier that day, a local activist group, Justice Rising, had knocked on his door, led by a wiry woman named Mara, with a shaved head and a voice like a megaphone. "We saw the video, Marcus," she'd said, eyes fierce. "We know they're lying. We're with you." They handed him a check, $2000, scraped together from crumpled bills and coins collected at vigils. A lifeline. Marcus had shaken their hands, his grip firm, gratitude swelling in his throat. "This means everything." Mara had grinned. "We're just getting started. They won't silence us." That night, Lena baked cornbread, the kitchen warm with its scent. They sat together, plotting their next move. Marcus promised her, "We'll rebuild. I'll clear my name. We're stronger than this." For the first time in days, he believed it. Sheila wasn't resting. She sat in her cramped apartment, blinds slanted shut, a fan rattling in the corner as she scrolled through Marcus's life. Her buzzed hair was damp, hazel eyes glinting with spite. Victor Rawls lounged across from her, his meaty frame spilling over a folding chair. His graying mustache twitched as he sipped his beer. "He's getting cocky," he growled, nodding at the screen. Justice Rising's Facebook page glowed with posts. "Marcus Holloway, hero of Atlanta. Fight the frame up." Sheila's fingers tightened on the mouse. Not for long. She had lost the assault charge, but the weapon's lie stuck. And now, this support threatened her grip. Victor smirked. "Hit him where it hurts. His precious little family." Sheila nodded, her plan already forming, a venomous seed taking root. That night, while Marcus slept fitfully beside Lena, Sheila struck. She hacked into a dark web forum, her skills rusty but sharp enough, and posted Lena's workplace, Sunshine Daycare, a cheerful spot 5 miles from home where she taught toddlers shapes and songs. "Wife of felon Marcus Holloway works here. Shut it down." By morning, the post had spread. Racist trolls and bots amplified it into a digital wildfire. "Boycott this dump. She's as bad as him. We'll burn it down." At 7 a.m., the daycare's owner, Clara, called Lena, her voice shaking. "I can't keep you, not with this. We're closing today." Lena stood frozen in the kitchen, the phone slipping from her grasp, crashing onto the tile. Her job was gone. Their savings, a thin thread, had just snapped. Marcus woke to her sobs, stumbling downstairs in boxers, his heart sinking as she recounted the call. "They're after me now," she choked. "Because of you. Because of them." He pulled her close, her tears soaking his chest, rage boiling in his gut. "I'll fix this," he swore, but the words felt hollow. He stepped outside, the humid air slapping his face, and saw it. A brick on the porch. Jagged. Heavy. A racial slur scrawled in red paint, the letters dripping like blood. Glass crunched under his bare feet. The front window, shattered. Curtains fluttering in the breeze. A message from Sheila's unseen army. "You're next." Neighbors peeked out. Some horrified. Others nodding. "Told you he's trouble." The world shrank. His family now a bullseye. Lena swept up the glass, hands trembling. Marcus called Tanya, his voice low. "They've gone too far. They're hitting Lena." Tanya's response was sharp. "Document it. Every shard, every threat, we'll use it." But her tone carried a warning. The case was slipping. The jury's eyes were already cold. Justice Rising posted their support online. "Stand with Marcus and Lena." But the trolls drowned it out. Criminals deserve nothing. The tide was shifting faster now. Marcus boarded up the window, hammer striking harder than needed. Each nail a vow to fight. He thought the rally was rock bottom. He thought the community's cash was his lifeline. But Sheila and Victor had ripped it away, turning his home into a battlefield, turning his wife into collateral damage. Victor met Sheila in a gas station lot that evening, the air thick with exhaust, his SUV idling. She leaned against her cruiser, arms crossed. "Daycare's toast," she smirked. Victor chuckled, his beefy hand slapping the wheel. Now we crush his spirit. They had turned Marcus's hope to ash. The brick was a warning shot. The job loss, a gut punch. And they weren't done. The courtroom loomed. And their next move would draw blood. Marcus stood on his porch that night, the slurse red paint a scar on his mind. He'd rebuilt once. Thought he'd protect Lena. But now, the enemy was inside his walls. And the fight was personal. Uglier. Deadlier than ever. What's your take on this brutal twist? Comment number 1 if you think Sheila's gone too far. Hit like if you're raging for Marcus and Lena. And subscribe, because this war is heating up fast. Can Marcus shield his family from this onslaught? Or will the next strike break them for good? Keep watching to find out. A woman with a cane incinerated a child. A lone sneaker lay in the wreckage. Blood pooled on the asphalt. 30 more injured. Limbs twisted. Faces burned. The courthouse steps were a battlefield. Marcus crawled to Lena, her forehead bleeding from flying glass. "You okay?" he gasped. She nodded, dazed. "What happened?" Sirens wailed. Cops swarmed, their boots crunching debris. A stocky officer with a crew cut spotted Marcus. "Holloway, you're done," he roared, yanking him up, cuffs snapping on. "Manslaughter. You caused this." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't. I was pleading for peace." The cop shoved him toward a cruiser. The crowd was too broken to argue. Some wept. Others fled. The counter-protesters cheered. "Told you he's a killer." Sheila watched from the rooftop, her smirk stretching wide. "Beautiful," she muttered. Victor chuckled. "He's a murder now. No bail this time." They turned his plea into a massacre. Reggie's bomb, a masterstroke. News van spun the story. Explosion at Holloway rally. 3 dead. Live feeds cut to panicked anchors. Pattern of violence escalates. Marcus sat in the cruiser, his wrists bleeding under the cuffs, his mind reeling. He had begged for calm, rebuilt trust. But this was a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The city saw a monster, not a man. His bail was revoked. The judge's order was swift. Too dangerous. Locked in a cell, the bars cold against his back, Marcus sat. Tanya stormed the precinct at midnight, her heels a war cry. This is insanity. He was the target, not the bomber. The sergeant, a burly man with a scar, shrugged. "Evidence says otherwise, counselor." Witnesses saw him rile them up. She fought, but the system held. Marcus was caged. His suit was torn. His spirit fractured. Lena, bandaged at home, was alone. The activist support vanished. Too risky. Mara texted, pulling back. Sheila visited his cell, her boots echoing. Leaning close to the bars, her voice was a venomous purr. "Told you I'd win, Holloway. You're rotting here. Enjoy it." He stared back, silent, his eyes burning. Inside, the cracks widened. He thought he had risen, only to fall harder. Sheila's grip was iron. Victor's shadow, endless. The Fulton County Jail cell was a concrete coffin, its walls slick with mildew, the air stale with despair. Marcus Holloway sat on a metal bench, his broad shoulders slumped. The explosion at the courthouse rally still echoed in his skull. The fireball's roar. The screams of the dying. 3 lives snuffed out, 30 wounded, and his name branded as the cause. Manslaughter charges chained him here. Bail revoked. Lena's bandaged face haunted him. Her last words before he was dragged away, "We'll fight this." A vow he clung to like a fraying rope. Tanya Brooks, his lawyer, had been relentless, digging through the wreckage of his case. And now, in the dim glow of a flickering bulb, Marcus replayed her call from yesterday. "Found something big. Jamal's tape. It's our shot." Her voice was a lifeline piercing the gloom. He dared to hope. Maybe this could free him. Tanya had worked through the night, her office a warren of files and coffee cups. Her sharp eyes bloodshot as she pieced it together. The recorder Jamal Tate had handed Marcus before his trial. Victor Rawls' voice confessing. "Holloway's done. That Glock was a stroke of genius. Sheila and the rally, pure chaos." My guy Reggie's worth every dime. The original still in evidence, untouched by Sheila's reach. A miracle in a rigged system. By noon, Tanya stormed the courthouse, her heels a battle drum, filing an emergency motion. New evidence, Your Honor. It clears my client. Judge Tate, his hawkish nose twitching, granted a hearing. The prosecution scrambled. Harold Pitt's weak chin quivered. This is last-minute nonsense. But Tate's gavel silenced him. We'll hear it tomorrow. The next day, August heat seeped through the windows. The courtroom buzzed. The gallery was packed. Reporters, activists, gawkers. Their whispers a low hum as Marcus shuffled in, cuffs clanking. Lena sat in the front row, her forehead still bandaged, her fierce eyes locked on him, willing him strength. Sheila Brantley sat with pits, her buzzed hair gleaming. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl. She knew something was up, felt the shift, but not the blow coming. Tanya stood. Her voice thundered. Your Honor, we have a recording. Deputy Chief Victor Rawls admitting to framing Marcus Holloway. The gun, the rally chaos, all of it orchestrated. She clicked the player. Static crackled. Then Victor's gravelly growl filled the room. Holloway's done. Followed by Sheila's laugh. He's ours now. The jury gasped. A woman with a tight bun dropped her pen. A man with a goatee leaned forward, eyes wide. The gallery erupted. Shouts of liar and crooks bounced off the walls. Tate banged his gavel. Order. Pitts leapt up. Objection. Authenticity unverified. Tanya countered. It's from evidence. Chain of custody intact. Check the logs. Tate nodded. I'll allow it. Marcus felt his chest loosen. A breath he hadn't known he'd held escaped. The jury's faces softened. Doubt crept in. He glanced at Lena. Her hand clutched her throat. Tears brimming. They had them. He was sure. Freedom was close. He could taste it. Sheila's face paled, her fingers digging into the table. But Victor wasn't there. He was moving, a predator in the dark. By 3 p.m., the hearing broke. Tate ordered Sheila's suspension. Serious allegations, he intoned. And Marcus was released. No bail. Pending retrial. Lena rushed to him on the courthouse steps, arms wrapping tight. We did it, she whispered, her voice breaking. He hugged her back. The jumpsuit swapped for jeans Tanya had brought. The air was sweet with possibility. He thought he'd won, that the tape had shattered their lies. The jury's gasps echoing in his ears. A victory carved from blood and ash. They drove home. The sedan's hum quiet him. Lena's hand in his. We're coming back, he said. And she nodded, believing it too. The nightmare lifted. If only for a moment. Atlanta man alleges police conspiracy. A Georgia senator tweeted, looking into this. DOJ might too. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. Beside him on the couch, Lena's bandaged forehead caught the TV's glow. You're untouchable now, she whispered. He wanted to believe it. The tide was turning. The city was waking up. He thought he'd built a shield, one that Sheila and Victor couldn't penetrate. With the world watching, donations flooded in $1,000 by midnight. Enough for Tanya to push harder. We'll force a retrial, she vowed. For the first time in weeks, Marcus slept soundly, dreaming of justice instead of prison. But Victor Rawls wasn't sleeping. In his precinct office, blinds shut, his meaty hands flipped through a stack of freshly printed fake wanted flyers. Marcus's face stamped with armed and dangerous. A lie, printed an hour ago. His graying mustache twitched as he dialed Sheila. He's loud again. Time to hunt. Sheila took the call in her apartment, her buzzed hair damp from the shower, hazel eyes glinting with malice. Podcast, huh? Let him give them a show. She saw the senator's tweet, felt the heat, but she thrived in it. Victor's flyers were the spark. She'd light the fire. By morning, the flyers spread like disease, stuffed in mailboxes, taped to street poles, slipped into the hands of roughnecks in a Marietta Street biker bar, where swastika tattoos outnumbered teeth. Holloway's a killer hiding in plain sight, she whispered to Duke, a hulking man with a braided beard and scarred fists. Spread the word. Duke grinned, pocketing cash. By noon, the city was papered with a vigilante call to arms. Get him before he gets us. That evening, Marcus stepped outside, the air thick and sticky. He was heading to meet Tanya with the latest donation totals, his sedan parked 2 blocks away, a precaution after the last brick. The street was quiet, too quiet. Engines roared. 6 bikes tore around the corner, Duke at the lead, eyes wild. There he is. The flyers had done their work. A dozen more men spilled from a pickup, armed with pipes and bats. Killer, they screamed. Marcus bolted. I'm not armed, he shouted. But they didn't care. A bottle smashed at his feet, glass spraying. He ducked into an alley, the walls tight, air sour with trash. Boots thundered behind him. A pipe swung, cracking his shoulder. Pain exploded, blood soaking his shirt. He stumbled, fell, rolled. Their shouts became a feral chorus. And him. Duke's bat grazed his skull, stars bursting in his vision. Marcus kicked out, catching a knee, buying seconds. He crawled behind a dumpster, breath ragged, body screaming. They beat the metal. Come out, coward. Sirens wailed. Faint, but growing. Someone had called. The mob scattered, bikes roaring off, leaving Marcus bloody and broken. His sedan burned in the chaos, flames licking the sky. By the time the cops arrived, it was a charred husk. Sheila watched from her cruiser, her grin sharp. Then she stepped out. Officers hauled Marcus up. Public disturbance, she barked. Cuff him. The cops obeyed. Flyers don't lie, one muttered. Marcus, too weak to argue, let the cuffs bite his wrists. His shoulder throbbed, his head spun. Lena rushed to the scene. Let him go. The cops shoved her back. Marcus was thrown into the cruiser. Sheila leaned in. Thought you were big now, huh? Not anymore. His eyes burned through the pain. You won't win. She laughed, slamming the door. By morning, his bail was revoked. Too volatile, a judge ruled, swayed by Sheila's report. Mob attacked him. He provoked it. Tanya stormed into the courthouse. This is assault, not his fault. The system held. Marcus sat in his cell, his body bruised, his spirit fraying. The podcast's glow snuffed out. The senator silent. Donations stalled. The mob's blood wasn't his to bear. But Sheila and Victor had unleashed a beast. His name was filth again. Then came the trial. Judge Clarence Tate rapped his gavel. Order. Counsel, your move. Tanya rose. We've uncovered Victor Rawls' ties to the mob. Phone records. Payments. They attacked my client, not the other way around. Bank transfers. $500 wired to Duke. Burner calls, matching flyer drops. The jury shifted. A woman with a tight bun gasped. A man with a buzz-cut frowned. That's dirty, he muttered. Pitts, the prosecutor, leapt up. Objection. Speculative. Tanya countered. It's evidence, not theory. Check the timestamps. Tate nodded. I'll allow it. Marcus exhaled. The jury's eyes shifted. Doubt creeping in. Tanya pressed. Rawls orchestrated the violence. The flyers. The fire. He's the puppet master. Sheila, his blade. Murmurs rippled. A reporter scribbled. Conspiracy. Pitts floundered. No proof. Tanya smirked. She watched from her cruiser. Logged into the precinct grid. She's complicit. Sheila's fingers curled. The jury stared. Then Sheila stood. Voice trembling. A calculated quiver. Your Honor, I need to speak. He's stalking me. The room froze. Marcus's jaw dropped. What? She slid a stack of photos forward. Grainy shots of Marcus near her apartment. Dates doctored. I'm scared, she whispered. He's unhinged. The jury gasped. Liar. Tanya surged. These are fabricated. No calls. No witnesses. Sheila sobbed. I didn't report it. Too afraid. He's got people everywhere. The jury didn't wait. Their faces hardened. Tate sighed. Closing arguments. Pitt stood. Holloway's a menace. Incited riots. Stalked an officer. Manslaughter's the least of it. Convict him. Tanya fired back. He's the target. Rawls and Brantley framed him. The mob was theirs, not his. The jury vanished. Hours crawled. When they returned, the foreman spoke. Guilty. Assault on an officer. Manslaughter. 10 years. Marcus froze. The room erupted. Lena screamed. Tanya gripped his arm. We'll appeal. Sheila smirked, victorious. Then the clerk slipped a file to Judge Tate. His face drained of color. Tate's voice cut through. Hold him. Now. The room hushed. Sheila's smirk faltered. Tate turned to Marcus. You have something to say, son? Marcus stood. Yes, sir. I do. I'm Special Agent Marcus Holloway, FBI. The air shattered. Sheila's face drained to ash. Pitt stumbled. Tate tore open the file. Inside, a badge. DOJ orders. Evidence. Witnesses. Charges dismissed. Brantley and Rawls, under arrest. Marcus exhaled. The tide had finally turned. Jamal's witnesses flipped, and Juke, the biker, cracked under pressure. Rawls paid me, he confessed. Reggie, the bomber, was caught on tape. Victor's orders laid bare. A warehouse of files from a secret safe house sealed their fate. Every stop, every frame, every death, Marcus had documented it all. Sheila and Victor's empire, once untouchable, was now rotting at the core, exposed for all to see. Judge Tate ordered a full DOJ investigation. Cooperate or face contempt, his gavel thundered. Sheila collapsed, knees buckling. I didn't know, she whimpered. Marcus loomed over her. You knew enough, and you enjoyed it. His voice was cold, her tears now real, terror, not triumph. Victor glared. You'll pay. Marcus smirked, faint but lethal. Already did. Now it's your turn. He walked free, Lena at his side. The courthouse steps felt warm beneath his shoes, the city sprawling below, his battlefield, now his victory ground. The crowd parted, some cheering, others stunned. Agent Holloway, a reporter yelled, but Marcus waved them off. His arm tightened around Lena. Home, he said. She nodded. The nightmare was over. His cover was blown, his mission complete. Sheila and Victor were let out in cuffs, heads low, her pale face a ghost, his empire reduced to ash. The system they once manipulated had now become their prison. Marcus had played them. Every arrest a step, every blow a trap. He had risen, not from their ashes, but from his own. Back home, the cardboard over the window still hung, but the air felt lighter. Lena brewed coffee. You're safe, she said. He nodded. We are. But as they sat, dusk settling over the city, Marcus leaned in, his voice low. Congress is next. I have leads. This isn't the end. Lena's hand tightened in his. Together? He smiled. Always. The sting was closed, but the hunter wasn't done. The rot ran deeper, and Marcus would chase it relentless. The man they had caged was now their reckoning. Sheila's pale collapse, Victor's hollow threats, memories of his triumph, promises of battles yet to come. This gripping tale of Marcus Holloway unveils raw truths about resilience, systemic injustice, and the power of truth against overwhelming odds. The first lesson? Perseverance. Marcus endured brutal stops, false arrests, and a mob's wrath, yet he never surrendered. His quiet strength is a beacon for anyone facing unrelenting adversity. Even when the world turns against you, holding fast to your integrity can carve a path to redemption. Second, it exposes the deep rot of corruption. Sheila Brantley and Victor Rawls wielded their badges as weapons, manipulating evidence and destroying lives. It's a stark reminder that authority can cloak tyranny and that vigilance is crucial to challenge it. Third, the story underscores the cost of silence. The community's wavering support, Jamal's betrayal, Lena's suffering, each shows how fear and inaction can fuel injustice. It urges us to speak out, even when it's hard. Finally, Marcus's reveal as an FBI agent highlights the power of strategy. He played the long game, turning their traps into his triumph. His cunning and patience toppled giants. This isn't just a story. It's a mirror reflecting the battles we all face and the hope that lies in fighting back. What's your takeaway? Comment #1 if you believe standing up to corruption is worth the fight. Hit like if Marcus's twist stunned you. Subscribe for more tales of justice rising from the ashes. Share this if it moved you to act. Thanks for joining this journey through Atlanta's shadows. Your support fuels these stories. May you find strength to confront your own battles and wisdom to see truth through the storm.